Howdy y'all, and welcome to ZCJ Woodworks. Today I'm going to show you how I built this tabletop vanity and all the cool features I put into it. Let's get into it. Okay, first thing, you'll notice two main things. One, that there's looks like a car stereo here with two speakers, and two, that there's integrated LED lights here. They're both run off of these two different toggle switches. The left one is going to run the LED lights, the right one is going to be master power to the radio. The lights, like I say, are run off the left toggle switch, so when you're using it to put on your makeup or whatever it may be, you have them on, and when not, they're off. LED, they don't take a lot of energy and they give a lot of light. That was also a much more cost-effective option than putting in individual bulb sockets, as I would have to have paid for the bulbs and the sockets and the wiring for all of them. So this ended up being a cooler, more cost-efficient method of lighting. Other than that, like I said, the radio does take Bluetooth. It takes AM, FM. It does have an antenna that I built into the box back here. And it also has a USB port if you have a USB stick that plays music, all of that. And it has this remote I've never really used, but it does come with it. Last thing is, you'll see that I have this little auxiliary fan that has come preloaded with a few cute messages. Very cute, very fun. Also, when you do your makeup, I assume, I don't know, I don't do makeup, but I assume that it can help, blow your face off or keep you cool or whatever it may be. Other than that, I do have two adjustment knobs here. They're just bolts with threaded inserts on the sides. They can loosen up and you can adjust the mirror to wherever you want it to be and then tighten it to keep it there. Got a pretty good volume range. You can go all the way down where you can get it pretty loud, probably fill your whole room with sound. It's what I told myself. Why you be so heartless? Don't know you think it's harmless. It's tearing me apart. There's also a door access panel underneath that's held in with 4 screws, so that way if you ever need to get to the wiring of this, it's fairly easy. It's not glued in place. The mirror here is held in by some black silicone. And yeah, that's about it. Let's get into how I built this. Okay, I started by going on Amazon and ordering all the specialty stuff and electronics that I would need. Stuff like the radio, the speakers, the antenna for the radio, the LED strip lights, the power supply, and the toggle switches that you'll see here. Okay, then I went to break down some 1x4s that I bought to build the base. Now these I cut to rough length, and then I use my miter cut at a 45 so I can get clean corners and get the exact length after I do the base cut. Okay, here I go to my table saw so I can cut in a 1/4 inch deep by 1/8 inch wide insets on the inside of each piece that I cut for the box. That way I can lay in plywood on the top and on the bottom and have a seamless connection and encasement. Then I use a small chisel to clean up any burrs or anything sticking out, and here you'll see the inset that I'm talking about. Next up, I need to take the faceplate for the base and cut in a hole for the radio and for the speakers. Now this was a little more challenging than I had originally set out, but essentially I just measured the width of the radio and take that minus the width of the board that I have, divide that by 2 so I know how far from either side it's going to be, and then do the same thing for the height so it's in the middle. Once I do that, I can mark my corners, drill, and then use the jigsaw to cut out the rest of the remaining wood in the area. Now I essentially do the same things for the speakers on both sides. I also use the drill press to kind of get a little niche on the side, so that way the connections for the positive and negative speaker wires aren't pressed flat up against the wood. Next up, I need to take the radio wiring harness and get the left and right speaker wires, positive and negative, to connect to the speakers up front. So I isolate those, strip them back so I can put some female disconnects on them. So here I just take a quick trip back to the drill press to clean up some of the holes for when I solder in the wires to the speakers, and then I get a quick visit from my dad and my brother, and they get to see a little bit of what I'm doing. Now since these were really like computer speakers, and because of how small they were, you don't have regular speakers, they didn't really have terminals, so what I did was just took bare wire, wrapped it around the positive little loop, and soldered it in place so it wouldn't come off. And from there, I can connect a male disconnect to the end of that wire lead, so that way I'll have a little bit of play if I ever need to take them out, but they're still strongly connected. Now it's time for me to connect the power to the unit so that way I can test them now that the speakers are all connected and the antenna is connected. If I put power to the unit, I can test it and make sure everything's functioning before I get it all cleaned up and put together properly. Now that that works, it's time to disassemble it so I can get back to cleaning it up and then eventually painting it. Okay, here I drill in some 1/4-inch holes so I can inlay dowels that are going to connect the arms that hold the mirror. This is one of a couple of ways that you could do this. This just was the easiest and most structurally sound and most seamless that I could think of. Okay, now it's time to glue up the miters for the base box. I'm just going to use an old trick here, whereas you put painter's tape on the edges as you line them up, flip it over, put glue in the joints, and then just fold them all together and hold them together with tape until they dry. Okay, now I break down the lumber for the frame that's going to hold the mirror, as well as the arms that's going to hold the frame. Here I put a 3/4 inch round over on all the sides except for the bottom of the arms that's going to hold the mirror frame, just to give them a more rounded and sleek look. Next up, I change out my router bit for a 3/8 straight cut bit, so that way I can cut in or route in some inlays for the LED light strips that I'll be putting in around the mirror frame. Here are the dowels that I talked about earlier that are going to connect the base to the arms for the mirror. What I'm using here is a little bit of anti-seize lubricant, actually, just as a trick for me to get a clear and concise mark on the bottom of the arm, so that way I know where to drill my holes for the dowels so they line up perfectly. This is much better than guessing, much more accurate, and since I'm painting it later, I'm really not too worried about a little bit of gray color staying. Next, I take the board that's going to make the height of the mirror frame and I drill a hole in it in the center of the length and the width so I can put in a wooden insert that a bolt is going to go to hold the mirror in place after you adjust or tilt it. Now it's time to glue up the frame for the mirror. For this I was going to use the same trick as I did for the base box, but you'll notice that these are a lot thinner because I'm gluing them up on a different edge than the way that I glued up the box. So the tape really did not end up working out like I wish it would and like it did earlier. It ended up breaking and I ended up having to retape it and kind of panicking, so I didn't get a lot of footage on that, but I ended up finally getting it in place and just putting extra pieces of tape everywhere to hold it in place till it dried. Next, I'm breaking down some 1/4 inch ply for the base and for the mirror backing, but you'll see me pay attention to something else instead of this. So there I was just in my own head about something and wasn't completely focused on what I was doing, and as a result, my hands popped up a little bit and I got a good amount of kickback straight to the stomach. As you just saw, I glued in the inlay backing for the mirror, and now I'm going to size up and glue in this top panel for the base, and then I'm going to screw in the bottom panel so it's removable. Now that all the wood is basically glued together and put together, I'm just going through with a good coat of paint. This is Valspar Aspire, so it's supposed to be a one-coat paint. It's semi-gloss so you can clean it off, and the color is Ella Rose, which is made by Magnolia Homes and Joanna Gaines. That color is what my girlfriend picked. That's what she said she wanted, so that's what we went with. All that's left to do now is to put all the electronics back in, wire them all together, and put in the inline toggle switches for the lights and for the radio, which is what you'll see me do here. I didn't get much footage of me sticking the actual LED light strip into the inlay that I made because I ran out of storage and didn't notice. But here is just me working with the electrical connections, and you'll see a little bit of me sticking it on at the end. So it's just self-adhesive on the back, and in the corners I had to fold it to make it turn, and I used a little CA glue to hold it there. So this is just black RTV silicone that I put on the back of the mirror and all around the edges to hold it in. After I put it on the edges, I went around with a circular fondant tool to smooth it out, and everything that squeezed out of the sides I peeled off when it was dry and cleaned up with the abrasive side of a sponge. At the end here, you'll see me turn on the lights with no mirror in it because once again I ran out of storage and didn't notice, so I don't have great footage at the end, but that's why I displayed most of the finished product at the beginning of the video, so if you forgot, feel free to go back and check it out.